Welcome to our next story from A Hometown Scrapbook by Ben Weatherwax. Talcum Powder Rebellion. Hello there. Did you ever hear of the Talcum Powder Rebellion? Perhaps you have by another name. Maybe you'll recall the Talcum Powder Battle, but by any name we assure you it smells it's sweet. It was one of the strangest, unnatural phenomenon that Grays Harbor has ever experienced. Not a protest demonstration, no, nothing like the Boston Tea Party, and it did not resemble the shelling of Fort Sumter. It was something that could only be explained when you understood the Grays Harbor of 1910 and the people who lived here. And then there was the story behind the story too, and that was about as important as the story itself. So, when Dick has had a few words from our sponsor, we'll find the rather amazing story of the Powder Puff Talcum Powder Rebellion. There was something about 1910. The United States government was taking a census of the people who called Grays Harbor home. For the Grays Harbor that they called home was, except for its geographical characteristics and its weather, was a far cry from the one we live in today. It had passed through the sawdust age and was in the midst of a building boom that it had never known before. Riding the crest of soaring lumber markets, the cities of the north side of the harbor had outlasted those on the south side, and Aberdeen, Hoquiam, with Cosmopolis, were becoming the only remaining communities with the resemblance of cities. Outside capital was being attracted, new buildings were going up, and the air of the whole place was that here a great city would rise. The Chamber of Commerce spokesmen were chanting 50,000 by 1915. That was Aberdeen's theme. And they were watching the census with more than an average interest. In fact, in Aberdeen and Hoquiam, they had set goals for the census. Somehow people got the idea that if they could show a certain population, whether the people lived here or not, that somehow the figures would become reality. So when the census had been taken and the local agent, E.A. Case, had announced that the enumerators had completed the work, the city of Aberdeen asked for an extension of the time allotted. It was the feeling of the citizens, and in particular the Chamber of Commerce, that a few more little effort would produce several thousand additional names for the census. And Aberdeen wanted those thousands. They wanted them so badly that it decided to induce people to come to town to be counted. Aberdeen was determined to push its census count to a new record, whatever happened. So, a committee of active business people was named to make plans for a gala celebration to which all the people from outlying areas would be invited to town, and the census takers were informed that there would be more people to count. Though special dispensation from the Tacoma office of the census, a 3-day extension was granted to Aberdeen to count any persons who had not previously been listed. And Friday night, May 13th and 14th, 1910, were declared carnival days for the city. There were counter attractions. Halley's Comet had been streaking through the skies, and people had been out on clear nights looking up and telling their friends how the celestial display appeared to them. But the local business folk were determined that this would be something most worthwhile, a citywide carnival, and everyone in the county would know about it. Jim Bowes and Dan Pearsall were named as committee of two to arrange for a tent show, and they shook down the town for curiosities and relics to display in their exhibit of 10,000 wonders. As they tilted their exhibit, every merchant in town planned something in a way of an attraction. Some had special gifts for shoppers during the 2 nights. Others worked lottery angles to give away jackpot gifts. The town band was out in force, and on Friday night, the 13th of May, the people flocked to Aberdeen. Now we might point out something of the state of the average person's mind about Aberdeen census. It had not been taken officially since the turn of the 20th century. There was no method by which a city head could count accurately, or if there was, it was not used. So the citizens didn't know whether they were booming in the town to show a count of 15,000, as one paper suggested, or whether they were booming towards a possible 20,000. Whatever it was, they were booming the census. And as the people streamed into Aberdeen for the first of the two-night carnival, the committee got the thrill every time a streetcar full arrived from Hoquiam, or a riverboat loaded docked from Westport, Acosta, or Cosmopolis. And throughout the evening, throngs swarmed the streets of the town, joining the carnival spirit. Aberdeen's new Finch building was the center of attraction. It was brand new, the only building in the county with an elevator, and the pride of Aberdeen. And people walked through its halls, rode the elevator, and marveled at its height. They were all sure it would last only a few years. Most of them felt certain it would sink in the tide flats. But while it stood there, pristine, new, and uncommonly beautiful, the town shared its marvel with the whole county. The band paraded, serenaded in front of the Finch building, and uniformed drill teams joined the lines of march. Jim Bowes and Dan Purcell climbed onto the Barker's platform and huckstered their tickets. And they had plenty of takers to see their museum of marvels. Kids were given favors, and popcorns, peanuts, and red lemonade was available everywhere. And through it all, the census taker went searching for people they had missed. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack, everyone agreed. But once in a while, they would turn up a resident who lived nearby who hadn't been totted up with the rest. And from later results, it appears they found a number who were willing to be counted twice. And so, Friday night went with a bang. Saturday night was even bigger. This time the hucksters sold confetti and torpedoes and showers of paper, and the banging of the fireworks added to the din. And it was late in the evening that the old-fashioned custom of throwing confetti blossomed into something new. Some lady, no one could remember who, was showered with confetti and answered right back by throwing a small box of talcum powder from her purse all over her tormentor. It covered him like a flower bomb, and he wiped it out of his eyes and combed it out of his hair. And everyone on the corner of Heron and G Street thought it was riotously funny. Someone hurried into the Bassett Drug and News Store on East Heron Street and bought a large box of talcum powder. He threw it in handfuls at the people who passed by. Others thought it was funny, and the Aberdeen drugstore in the Finch building enjoyed a run on talcum powder as the rioters bought up every box, can, and package in the store. The Beckenhauer Drug Company had a similar sell-out, and down a few blocks, the Broadway Pharmacy was sold out of talcum powder in a few minutes. A crowd of young men invaded Eaton and Sweeney's drugstore on South H Street and bought all their talcum powder and even all the cornstarch in the store. Evans Drugstore and the Red Cross Pharmacy sold out in 10 minutes. And now the stuff was exploding up and down Heron Street like bomb puffs as the playful young men of the town tossed it by handfuls at each other. By this time, women were leaving the crowded streets to protect their clothing and persons, and many men found the growing fog of powder too much to cope with. They took cover. But the game went on. Some of the pranksters found vantage points and second-story windows and showered talcum powder cornstarch, and now a new source of growing fog flour down onto people below. Fights started as the cloud of white stuff would cover someone not equipped with the kind of sense of humor necessary for this situation. Clothes were ruined, and the length of Heron Street was shrouded in the citizens later described as a sort of fog. The police tried vainly to quell the talc curling. They finally were satisfied just to protect themselves. The white powder looked good on their blue coats, the rioters discovered, and when an officer ventured into the area, he was showered with the stuff. The throwing was now becoming intimate. Tiring of hurling the powder, many men were clamping handfuls onto the heads of others, snatching hats and filling them with flour, then jamming them onto the owners' heads. At midnight, the night of May 14th, Aberdeen's Main Street was a bedlam of wild celebrants battling and hovering in white fog that smelled like a barber shop and tasted like paper hanger's paste. The fog drifted into stores, though transoms and open doors and covered the merchandise with layers of a pale dust. It was nearly daylight before the last of the carnival throngs trooped home, leaving Heron Street in a condition it had never been in before, nor has it been in since. The street was blanketed in white, almost as though a snowfall had drifted in the spring morning. Except there were cans, boxes, and sacks everywhere that had contained the ammunition for the battle. Street Commissioner C.E. Arthur viewed the street and scratched his head. To him, it was a black Sunday. Now, Dick, right here, say a few words from our sponsor. Yes, that was quite a holiday, the Census Carnival, and the townsfolk came out to call, or the Talcum Powder Puff Rebellion. Street Commissioner Arthur turned his white wings loose on Heron Street, and they brushed the powder into heaping piles. The big rotary street sweeper went into operation and laid windows of the stuff along the gutters where city wagons scooped it up. The Sunday Morning Tribune, Aberdeen's morning paper of the era, clucked editorially over the waywardness of Grays Harbor's young men and bemoaned the tragic end of the big weekend. And the census? Well, there was a story there too. The papers assured the citizens that the town had been increased by at least 1,000 persons caught in the act of attending the carnival. A population of 15,000 was assured. But there was an aftermath to that too. A few months later, an Aberdeen census enumerator was hauled into federal court in Tacoma and charged with having listed fraudulent census figures and paid his fee. And the government went out looking for others who had bothered to stick to the facts when they were itemizing Aberdeen's population during the big census take. And the census count? Well, when it was published, it was a big disappointment to everyone, for it fell considerably short of the 15,000 mark. Just 1,660 souls called Aberdeen home, according to Uncle Sam's count in 1910. But the census produced several things that brought the city much publicity, and not at least was the Powder Puff Rebellion, that the old-timers will recall with a chuckle as a manifestation of the city's growing pains back then in the dusty past, just 40 years ago last month, as recorded here in our hometown scrapbook. Thank you for listening. Make a little history of your own.